us beforehand was, you can see on the slide, with so many Fabry patients with ACE inhibitors, what is the latest data on how they can influence COVID-19? Would Professor Eskens want to comment on this, or do we wait for Dominique to return?
No, I can comment on it because I showed it in the last slide. So don't stop ACE and ARBs because, okay, it is known that the virus is the receptor for the virus, the COVID-19 virus, is the ACE receptor. But for sure now there is no evidence that taking ACE inhibitors or ARBs are harmful. So don't discontinue them to use them. Is that clear?
Yes, that's very clear. Thank you. Thank you for making it so clear. I'm moving on to the next question. We have received, is it safe for me or my loved one to continue going to hospital visits for, I'm assuming, for Fabry treatment? Professor S?
Yes. Well, most important is to continue all therapy. So also when you have to go to the hospital, and there is no home infusion in your country available at this moment, so continue to get it. The most important is that, well, not much people are allowed, so you have to go alone, because only children, one parent can stay with them, but with adults, they have to go alone to the hospital, and they will be checked before they are going to enter. And most important, perhaps, is when you have a chronic treatment going on, that you ask your physician to get you a letter that you can show at the entrance of the hospital, where it is say that you come to visit and having your treatment there at that moment. That can be helpful, because otherwise you can get in the row, and the rows are at sometimes very long. But continue to have your treatment, whatever it takes. Is that also
your advice to the elderly patients?
Yes.
And when I say elderly, I mean 70 plus, who are in the biggest risk group. That is also your advice. Okay, that's good to know. Should we move on to the next question, Charlotte? I'm worried about an interruption to the supply of my medicine.
Well, I think that most of people are concerned with this, but at this moment, there's certainly no reason that that there is an interruption to the supply. So I've heard several firms confirming that they will have lots of supply for the whole of the world. So there's no need to worry at this moment. And no, certainly not. I think that there is much less supply of other things, like this alcoholic gel, just to clean your hands and so on, but certainly not of this of the medication that is specific for Fabry disease.
That is very
Germain. Sorry.
Yes.
Professor Germain, are you willing to add something on this question, or are you okay with this? Professor Germain, do you hear us? He's there, but...
Okay, we'll give him a moment.
Yeah, but just continue, because he doesn't...
Should we take a look at the next question? Charlotte, do we have a next question?
Yes.
Yes, the fourth question is showing on the screen.
Yes. What if the center is not able to guarantee the administration of the therapy? I think it's a little bit touching the same question as the previous question.
Yeah. Well, then you should be referred towards another center that can guarantee the administration of the therapy. In some countries, of course, there is a long distance between all the centers. It's not, well, compared to little countries as there is Belgium, we are living only 30 kilometers or 40 kilometers from each center. So, but most important is that when the center, due to other problems, like the staff is getting ill and is wiped out, then it's important that you're going to be referred to another center that can administer the therapy. Or if there is a possibility to switch to home therapy.
Yes, obviously all of the information and the suggestions are, you know, the country specific.
Yes,
all countries have different situations as far as centers and therapy locations go. I heard something on the screen from Professor Germain. You probably can hear us, but we cannot hear you. Still not? Was there a fifth question, Charlotte?
No, there's not. We can move on to live questions.
Okay. Now we'll move on to live questions from the audience, but please, Charlotte will hand out the turns to ask questions because she's the host in this webinar, and please keep your microphones muted if you are not asking a question, so that you know we can all hear. And also, because this is a patient organization meeting, we ask you not to mention any product or product names. Thank you. Charlotte, do we have a first question?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Also ask questions through the chat box if you prefer to do so, and then we can read them out loud. Yeah.
You can use the chat box to ask questions in the on the lower level where you can see the little circles. It's the one in the middle. I think there was a question already, was there?
No.
Can we take a look at the chat box?
We have a suggestion that maybe if Professor, oh yeah, here we go. He answered himself. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, there's a first question. Shall I read it out loud from the chat box? Is the incidence of hospitalizations and death versus the flu correct given how many undiagnosed patients with mild symptoms there are?
Well, I've seen that also Dominic Germain can answer in the chat box, but I will give my answer. At this moment, well, it depends on how many tests that you perform in your country. And so in our country, Belgium, the first rule was not to test everybody. And therefore, we don't know the exact number of infected patients. So at the beginning of this week, we're going to that is the case also in Germany, to test lots more of patients with milder disease symptoms, and so then we can have a real number of infected patients in our country. So it depends on the screening that you perform, and there's the PCR tests that are performed in the country.
Okay. We have a question on the chat box from Megan. Are the clinical trials on hold right now that are going on in the world? Would Professor German or Professor Eskens have an opinion or information on this?
Well, Dominic says no, and I can say also from my experience, no clinical trials are on hold at this moment. And not only for Fabry, but also not for other diseases. So they can continue. So that's for sure.
Yes, Professor German is also answering on chat box. We are doing our best to maintain the clinical trials. Probably this is a very important issue, he says. All efforts should be to maintain the clinical trials going.
And that's also the pharmaceutical industry also support this, that we continue to treat these patients in the clinical trials. It would be a pity that we have to stop them.
Yes, and he continues, of course, we have to allow some minor protocol deviations.
Yeah, minor protocol deviations, that's for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps also I can add that in some studies that our patients are more centralized in a few centers, so that they are not traveling around the world anymore. But that's not the case for Fabry. In my opinion, that's not the case for studies on Fabry disease. But for other diseases, people that are in Europe, they stay in Europe and not travel to the United States anymore.
Okay. Does anybody have a question for Dr. Ali on mental well-being? We have another question while you wait from Jackie. Jackie asks, some Fabry patients in England are being offered pneumococcal vaccine. Is this a wise precaution with reference to COVID-19? Professor German answers, I think little is known about this.
That's also for sure. At this moment, I think that nothing is clear, and there is no real medication that you can say, or vaccine or vaccination that you can say it's useful in treating this disease or preventing serious deterioration.
Okay. Professor German writes that the Dutch doctors have proposed the use of vaccine against tuberculosis.
Yeah.
And then we had a question from Denmark. Was it Irene? She asked if it would be safe for Fabry patients to stay at home. I lost the question already, but it was something along the lines of, even when the other people with no rare disease or a serious disease will get away from isolation. And Dominic responds that it's safer to stay at home. Do you have an opinion, Professor Eskens?
Well, in my opinion, it depends on the country where you get your treatment. So in Belgium, there is also home therapy available, but most of the patients, they go to the hospitals. And there's a lot of problems now going on that they are scared to go to the hospitals. And I've already said, don't be scared at all, because there's a lot of precautions that are taken, so you're not at risk going to the hospital. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Professor Germain is saying that they are advising the patients not to go to the hospital in France. They have transitioned people to home therapy, probably all that can, but there are obviously, my point in this is that there are obviously countries with no home therapy available.
Mm-hmm. Well, as there is in Belgium, it is paid by pharmaceutical, and at this moment we only have 10 places open to have home therapy, and then they have to switch, of course, rather very fast. I think it's more harmful to do a switch at this moment than to prepare patients for home therapy in a much better condition. That's my opinion.
Then we have a question from, I believe, Switzerland, from Beate. And the question is, why does the COVID affect the why does the COVID affect the kidneys? Or rather, probably does the COVID affect the kidneys? What do we know about that? Professor Germain says yes.
And proteinuria and hematuria.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and there is a decreased glomerular filtration rate due to this virus, to COVID-19. So it's also altering the kidney function. That is already much affected in some patients with Fabry disease. So yes, it's a multi-system. Yes, it's also a multi-systemic disease, but also the virus, the COVID-19, is a multi-organ disease, and for sure it affects the kidney function.
Okay.
But yes.
Then we had a next question coming in from Erica. What is this is to Professor Germain, but feel free to answer also, Professor Eskins. What is your opinion on stopping ERT during isolation while on home therapy? Probably in regard of whether the nurses coming to your home are a risk. I'm assuming that's the idea. Yeah. Seems to be a very, very tricky question.
Yeah, in my opinion, it depends how safe the nurses at home can come to the home and also get the infusion getting done, because well, in the hospitals we have lots of mouth mask and also other things, and in the home therapy, so it's only for 1 week that also the nurses doing the home treatment are protected, and can be then also protect people when having mouth masks and hand gloves and so on. So it depends on the situation. It's not very clear for everybody.
Okay. We have a question from Michael. Michael is asking, the Fabry patients are not necessarily at a higher risk of catching COVID-19 than the general public, but it's probably a harsher effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that's, and unless of course we are talking about people with transplants. Mm-hmm. Or patient with transplants.
Yeah.
Oh, we have the next question from Sweden. are Fabry patients to be considered being in the risk group, even though they don't have severe symptoms from Fabry disease in heart or kidney or other organs? And Dominic says, I don't think most Fabry patients are more at risk.
They are not more at risk.
Yes. Yes.
It depends, in my opinion, it depends also of the organ involvement. So it's people with kidney severe, everybody is at risk. Everybody, that's for sure. Dominique is right. Everybody is at risk. So, but some people are more at risk. In chronic diseases, there is a risk that is considered to be a risk group. Keep in mind this, that.
Yes. Yeah. We have time for a few final questions. So anyone who has a question in mind, please send it through via the chat. Michael writes, does the fact one has an ICD pacemaker make a difference? And Professor Germain responds, if infected, monitor your breathing.
Yeah, yeah. So tachypnea is a very important sign. Yeah.
Yes. Anyone else have a question?
So
Still time for perhaps one more. If not, then obviously we want to remind you that there's a lot of information going around, and there's a lot of resources that are handing out information on COVID-19 and also COVID-19 and rare diseases. So we have put on the final slide, we have gathered some reliable sources that that you can check. And please keep on checking for the updates and the current information. And without further ado, I would like to hand over to Lute for the final words. Lute, if you please.
Yes, thank you. First of all, it's a pity that we couldn't hear the presentation of Professor Germain, but we will continue, so we will have the chance to hear his presentation perhaps later. So thank you all for your questions and for taking the time to participate in this webinar. We would also very much like to thank our expert panel for their valuable contribution and also thank our industry partners for their ongoing support. We will continue to gather information and share this within our community. We also plan to schedule in more webinars in the near future. And do not hesitate to reach out to us during this difficult time. We hope you are able to continue to spread important information about Fabry disease during Fabry Awareness Month. So don't forget. Thank you all for your attention. Until next time. Thank you.